basically a season 2. I don't know how seasons work with podcasts, but it's almost been a year since we last recorded.
It's a thing, like, a couple of the podcasts I listen to, they're like, all right, coming back with season 10. And I'm like, well, it's not like there was a break. You're still releasing episodes. So.
All right, so we're a little more official. We had a break.
A long
had
one.
Nothing to do with laziness or, just not even trying. It was definitely just the schedule that the podcast goes on. So season 2, we upgraded our mic. Hopefully there's a difference that is a little more pleasing to our audience's ears.
Also, our mic table is different than the beer table, so that should help.
We're not in a literal dungeon like we were for season 1 either.
Yeah.
Nice little couch here.
To catch our new guest up, originally we recorded in a sand floor basement. Not even a basement, more of a crawl space.
I bet the acoustics are real good in there.
Yeah.
For our shit mic, it actually worked.
Our shit mic and 5 people around a single directional,
But anyway, I'm Jarvis.
I'm Blake.
I'm Preston.
This is Preston's first episode with the Foxhole.
Yes, it is.
Welcome, Preston.
Thank you. Good to be here.
The way we got Preston to join, I was, he and I are roommates, so I'm on the phone with Jarvis. We're figuring out the plans, and he's like, "You got somebody to join?" I was like, "Hey, yo, you trying to come record?" He's like, "Yeah, sure."
That's exactly how that went down.
So here we are.
Preston, introduce yourself.
I am Preston. I am Blake's roommate, and I have worked with both Blake and Jarvis.
In the sex field.
I'm not complaining.
He said, "Well, I've only had sex with 112 women." Oh.
Not that many. Damn. Hey, I have a bad enough reputation as it is. Don't have to make it worse.
Hey, who's counting? You got a discount brunette Chris Hemsworth.
Hey, it works, right?
We are starting off the subject for this episode somewhat surrounding ancient Egypt and ancient civilizations in general. I believe Blake has been doing some research on the matter. If you want to start us off.
All right, so I'm gonna preface with the fact that I don't have any sources.
This isn't financial advice.
So I mean, obviously, take everything we say with a grain of salt.
I'm pretty sure they do that already.
Yeah, they should do your own research.
But do our sources have sources?
Yeah,
like when you get down to it, the people you're sourcing, what are their sources?
The only source,
probably better than our sources.
only source I'm concerned with is Highlander, the source, movie number 5, baby.
Okay.
No, so I've always been interested in like aliens and ancient stuff, and I have some alien tattoos. This is my thing.
He was abducted once. They probed him.
The X-Files.
The gothic kid coming in, point with the alien shit. Makes sense.
Okay. So basically, like, what really caught my interest was I was listening to some stuff, reading some stuff that suggests that ancient Egypt, like the pyramids, the Temple of the Sphinx, are a lot older than we think it is. And from what I understand, academics put it around 2,500 years old from our point right now. Again, if you want to correct me on Twitter, correct me on Twitter. I think we have a Twitter.
Absolutely. We don't have the account, and we haven't posted anything.
No, we do. We do have a Twitter. I made it. And I haven't touched it in a year.
I feel like you're slacking
because of our season break.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But what caught me the most was like there are these this like weathering, like wear and tear on the Temple of the Sphinx that, when looked at by a geologist, suggests like it only could have gotten that from thousands of years of rainfall. But from what we know about Egypt, and when we think the Temple of the Sphinx, the pyramids of Giza were built, there hadn't been rainfall for years. So basically, like, it has to be older than what we think it is, like far, far, far beyond. And something else that suggests that is like star patterns. So every 12,500 years, the pyramids of Giza line up with Orion's belt, and the Temple of the Sphinx is staring at some constellation that I can't remember because we didn't research, because that's not what this podcast is.
It's
people talking shit.
Yeah.
So that suggests that it's at least somewhere within 12,500 years old. If not, go back 28,000 years, maybe it was fucking built then. And then, it's kind of ties into like certain river flows that could have been in there, and
The
that
Nile
like
River.
not denial, but
I didn't say denial.
just like a river that flowed through there at the time that could have been used to transport all the bricks and stones that were used to create it. And that's something Jarvis was talking about. And like we know about ancient oceans and ancient waters. Like, I'm from Kansas, and you can go out and like when they're blowing hills and shit to make roads. Like people go out and they find shark teeth because of an ocean that went through the middle of fucking America. So like water shit changes, and then it all ties into Atlantis, and we'll get there. But it's just like
There's a lot of different outlooks on that, though.
So in terms of water erosion,
The flood?
the flood. So that's one
that
that
makes
is
the most logical sense.
So almost every ancient religion and modern religion now, their historical texts, some of which that have had no encounter with each other in their past, all talk about like this great flood that happened. So multiple sources, never speaking to each other on different parts of the world, all talk about like this big flood that happened in ancient times. Without corroborating that story, it seems likely that may have happened. It would be pretty statistically impossible for each of these religions to come up with the exact same story talking about how this giant flood happened all over the earth,
Well, that's also part of like the sinking of Atlantis. Atlantis fell under a flood, and I think what they believe happened, some of the people who are more in line with like Egypt being old as shit, like ancient civilizations being around for way longer than we think, is that there were these glaciers, there were ice ages and shit, like giant ice formations where water was like kind of freely underneath it in a way, and it broke free, like an ice shelf or something, and released so much water, displaced the fucking the ocean super high, and something like that is gonna take away water from some places, flood others. Like,
so from the Christianic point of view,
before we go any further, this man's a deacon, so he like anybody who's done research is him, and it's all been the Bible.
Yes, I am. I have been very well versed in biblical readings. So Christianically speaking, the Great Flood happened because there was out in the atmosphere, there was like a water bubble around the earth in the beginning of time, and when the flood happened, that water bubble burst and came down on the earth.
They call it the firmament.
The firmament, correct. And before the flood happened, everyone lived hundreds of years because it was like a greenhouse effect on the earth, because the rays of the sun would hit the firmament, and it wasn't the damaging rays. Everything grew. It was like a greenhouse. The entire earth was like a greenhouse.
Well, that's why Noah's believed to be like 900 years old.
Exactly. That is exactly why.
Well, in a way that it's like dinosaurs and ancient and like insects and stuff, like prehistoric, are all big as fuck.
Yes.
And that, I mean, from what I understand, that has to do with like atmospheric pressure and
Exactly.
the fact that there's just like, what was it, less oxygen, more oxygen,
less pressure from the atmosphere on Earth itself.
So they could grow to be that size and not have it affect them
Exactly.
and be able to breathe. So like, I get it. It's coming
So,
in.
like,
Everything's coming up Millhouse.
Yeah.
Operation Paperclip is when we brought a bunch of Nazis over to work for the United States after World War II, one of which was the head of NASA. The head of NASA was a former Nazi scientist, and he was the head of NASA for something like 30 years. On his tombstone, he actually has a passage from Psalms in which literally just talks about how the firmament is there in existence, which is interesting. Why the head of NASA would have that passage in particular on his gravestone talking about the firmament. Just something to think about.
You were saying?
Also, another thing that, like the Grand Canyon, this is getting way off topic.
Well, I mean, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. So the Grand Canyon, how, like, everyone's like, it would take thousands and thousands and thousands of years for the Grand Canyon to be formed. Well, a very big like belief in the Christian world is that when the floods got drained into the oceans, that was a canal that the waters went through, and the irrigation from the waters, because water is very powerful against the earth, dug that out in like a matter of days.
You know, I used to use the Grand Canyon as a way to sound deep to women. I would be like, you know, it just shows that persistence is everything. Look at the Grand Canyon. Just water did that over thousands of
One
years.
little spigot of water.
It's just a little drop, finally, slowly ebbing away.
I think it worked like 30%
I'm sort of
of
like
the
that
time.
spigot.
that often. I'm impressed that it worked 30% of the time.
30% is my go-to statistic when I want to make things sound like I'm not that good. Like when go ahead.
When I was at the Grand Canyon as a child, I actually watched a rat commit suicide. It changed my perception of life.
I'm sure it did.
Because I thought that animals were on the same playing field as people in their emotional knowledge and everything like that. And so I'm on one of the observation decks just looking over the edge of the Grand Canyon, and I look over and there's this large rat, and he's just like running towards me and just passes me, goes right for the ledge, and it just jumps. I see him fall until I don't even see the rat anymore. And for the next few years, I really just thought about this rat and what he might have been thinking, why he killed himself.
What was going on in his little rat world?
What sort of things have been going on in his rat brain?
Maybe his rat wife left him.
Yeah, his rat wife cheated on him or something like that.
Yeah, with a raccoon, I hear.
That changed.
With a raccoon. That's a weird dynamic right there.
Something else I thought was interesting, and I guess it's not really talked about a whole lot, is like with the pyramids and the Sphinx, is that there are other structures that are even deeper that are still being uncovered. Maybe they have been uncovered. I don't know. I don't do a lot of research.
Right. Like what I was telling Blake earlier about this location called Göbekli Tepe. It's a location in Turkey in which they just uncovered a very partial amount of it.
When did they uncover this? Do you remember?
This was a couple years ago, maybe like 5 years ago.
Okay. That should actually be like 15.
In terms of its relation to all of ancient civilization, 5 or 15 years is pretty minuscule, because based on the dating techniques that they're using to figure out how old this site is, it predates Sumeria, which is what's taught in public education is the oldest ancient advanced civilization in humanity. And Göbekli Tepe, using the same dating methods, goes back 4,000 years prior to Sumeria, which was supposedly the first civilization that had like a written language and things of that nature. But Göbekli Tepe, they found that, right. They just found this shit recently, and it also has a written language. It's got symbolism. It's got, they had like statues of different figures in which they believed were the gods that they worshipped at the time. So they had some sort of a religion. Supposedly, based on what they found, that's what they've sort of deducted from that. But they've only uncovered like 10% of the site at most. Like there's a large portion of the site they still yet to uncover. They don't have a lot of funding for some reason. Nobody's really interested in Göbekli Tepe.
So I've been getting into Graham Hancock, who's essentially Indiana fucking Jones, and that's where I found out all this stuff about like Egypt and all that shit. And there's some other weird stuff like off the coast of Japan, and I forgot where I was going.
Japan.
Japan.
There was this one time I was in the Food Lion parking lot, right? I drive a Honda. I was just grocery shopping. I come out, and there's this old Japanese lady who was apparently like 93 or something, and she came up to talk to me about my Honda. And it's one of the more modern Hondas, so it's pretty advanced looking, especially to a 93-year-old. She comes up to me, and she's like, "Is that Honda? Is that Honda?" I'm like, "Yes, it's Honda." She's like, "Oh, yes, I remember when Honda was made. I remember when they started that company."
We've all
I
had
was
a
like,
couple
oh,
beers,
okay.
So our train of thought's
The,
gonna be
A little scattered.
But yeah,
I'm only on my third.
It's just crazy to think about like what
Wait.
people her age have gone through. I was like, okay, so you must have been in Japan during World War II. Like, what was that like? She's like talking about how
bright, I
she's
bet.
like, well,
Oh, goddamn.
so not for her. That's why she was there to talk to me. She said, yeah, no, we had to get moved out to the more rural areas. So I had to like, my school had like 18 people in it. Like, we were lucky enough to get moved out to the rural areas during World War II. No melting skin, nothing.
Stop. The U.S. dropped the sun on us, and I moved to the U.S.
Too much.
Imagine what those pilots, what type of like a thought process they had. Like they dropped one bomb that killed hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
Like, imagine one single action that caused the death of hundreds of thousands of people.
Honestly, I wouldn't have been able to think about that.
I want to know, because, I mean, obviously it's probably super fucking classified who the pilots were. But, like, I'm really curious to see what their life was like coming back. And, like...
Honestly, I can't imagine it was that great because...
Well, yeah, exactly.
Like, as a soldier, like, if you go to war and you take out like an armed combatant, I'm okay with that.
Well...
I mean, okay.
If they haven't done it, you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, fair, but like I can justify that in my head, but I can't justify in my head dropping a bomb on a city full of men, women, and children that are not combatants.
So, like, my viewpoint on it is like, I've been overseas and I've been within 100 meters of a rocket, and now like unexpected loud booms fuck me up. Imagine being the dude who dropped an atom bomb on a city. Imagine
being the dude who an atom bomb was dropped on you. You know what I mean?
Well,
you probably wouldn't care because you probably don't remember it.
I was watching a skit about Captain America, and he came back and he was stopping this villain who was going to drop a nuclear bomb on New York or something, and he was like, "How evil can you be to drop a nuclear bomb on a populated city full of civilians? You're going to be the first one ever to do something like this," because he didn't know World War II happened.
That's a
That's a catch-22 right there.
But bringing it back, something Jarvis was saying earlier when we were having our little warm-up talk sesh is that like when academics believe, this is where I was going earlier. Graham Hancock, you're talking about the current theories and shit. He got a lot of flack for suggesting these other things from, like, the esteemed academics for suggesting that Egypt was older than we thought it was. And the academics are like, no, fuck no. And there was a thing where, like, he got asked to go on BBC. And this is, back in the day. I don't remember. I haven't looked into it. Everything with a grain of salt. And they brought him on to basically just disparage him and tell him that, like, or make him look like an idiot. And he sued and lost, and it's like the first time that the BBC was shown to like basically like get in trouble for actively trying to make someone look bad, and it was this guy. So if you have this major media trusted outlet trying to make someone look bad for suggesting something different from what we know of history, like that's pretty sus, bro.
Well, I mean, a lot of major news networks and any organization that's founded upon what they know and what they've uncovered, like their whole business is surrounded by what they've said is truth. And so if you have some sort of conflicting view that would go against their business, then technically you're a threat to them. And so you see all the time, whether it's a major news network or an organization like that like a medical organization or something like that, and they have some sort of a person coming online and saying, everything these people are saying is wrong, this is why, you don't have to spend money with them, it's as simple as this. Like, they're targeted. They are told, no, hey, these people don't know what they're talking about, they're crazy, and they try and use every method possible to sort of just erase that person's information from the internet just to protect their finances or their...
I mean, but can you really blame them if they're just, like, they're trying to make money? Like, at the end of the day...
Yeah.
Like, you can't fault them for doing... They're not doing anything that we wouldn't do in that situation if we had the ability to. So you cannot fault them for that. Well, if you had the ability... Standards. Well, I mean, that too. But, like... I mean, if you're if you're a big corporation, you're not going to have morals and standards.
If you're making that much money, I mean, that's the thing. Like, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and
everyone
in this world, having shitloads of money is absolute power. That's why, like, they say that a fine, like, if the punishment for a crime is a fine, it's only a crime for the poor.
Yes. Yeah, like a speeding ticket is nothing to a multi-billionaire.
Yeah, and that's like an issue with what your insurance goes up, their money doesn't fucking mean anything.
It doesn't mean shit.
And that's like an issue with these news corporations is they are for profit, they're for clicks, they're for views. So like
most of them, like in the actual like nitty gritty of their legal information, they're labeled as entertainment industries, not news networks.
Yeah.
Because they don't report news. They report what people want to hear, or they report what...
It's all about emotional
response. It's like everything is all...
riled up or feeling good.
Yeah, it's
Clicks
legitimately for
is
reactions.
Money. Yeah.
If
they're not bringing in... If they're not bringing in viewership, they're not making money. Mm-hmm. And so if you think that there's not going to be something interesting on the news, you're wrong. Yeah, they will go out, find something wrong, even if they have to go bomb a street. If they need to shoot up a school, they'll shoot up a school so that they can give you some news.
Have you guys seen that movie Nightcrawler?
I have not.
Jake Gyllenhaal?
I have not.
It came out in 2014, and he plays this fucking sociopath who finds out that like filming violent accidents or crimes and stuff, like he can sell it to the news stations and make money. So like it turns into spoiler alert. It turns into him like staging and setting shit up, like getting the information and then like making violent crimes happen so he can record, like just happen to be on scene and record.
Okay, now you're getting into conspiracy theories now here.
But like I don't know where I wanted to go with this was that a news station should be a public service, but then you get fucky
like PBS.
like PBS,
a public news service.
Yeah, or what's NPR?
Well, NPR can suck
But,
a fat
listen,
cock.
I don't listen to NPR. I just know that it's.
I was listening to them literally yesterday, and holy fuck, are they biased? Like,
but like,
okay, that's like saying any news station isn't biased, though.
Right.
Like every single one is biased in one way or the other.
At least try and hide it, At least,
but they don't. You're asking for them to do something that none of them do. It's blatantly obvious in every single news station.
But that's where it gets fucky. Is if you try to make it like a public service, then the government gets involved, and then it can very easily turn into like government propaganda.
See, but that's the problem. Is like, in my personal opinion, that's why I fucking hate the news. Is because like there is a biased opinion at every news station, and you can't watch one news station then watch the other. They'll be reporting the same thing, and they're gonna have two completely different opposite opinions on it. I just want to know what the fuck happened so I can make my own opinion on it and make a decision off that.
There are independent journalists out there where you can go and find some interesting stuff. It's just
but no one's going to do that.
So some people actually do that. They're just harder to find because nobody's watching.
That's exactly.
But if you actually seek out and find it, like there's a few people like on the app Telegram that I'll go on, and they're reporting stuff that just as they come in, they'll get sources and post it.
To our original conversation, Graham Hancock was a current events journalist until the 80s when he went to Ethiopia, and this monk was just, he was just standing around. There was gunfire. I really don't know what was going on in Ethiopia at the time because I don't know much about African politics in the 80s. But this monk was like, "Hey, yo, dude, I got the Ark of the Covenant in this temple back here." Graham's like, "Yo, can I see it?" And he said, "No." So then he just went into this super deep research of why the Ark of the Covenant would be in Ethiopia. And there are some stories that like kind of make it sound legit. And then I know Jarvis has something that happened recently that really makes it seem
just last year, early last year, there was a church in Ethiopia that was raided because they thought the Ark of the Covenant was there. Well, that's what I'm assuming is why they raided it. Because the church itself had been theorized to house the Ark of the Covenant and just so happened to be raided by the police and the local military. And they killed everyone in the church. No more on that, at least on the information I could find.
I mean, that's one thing you do not want to fuck with is the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
Like, straight up. Like, there's multiple scripture references of, like, there are specific people that are allowed to touch that and no one else. And if you touch it and you're not one of those prescribed people, you will fucking die.
I've seen Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
I know.
and that's the thing about Indiana Jones is that like the way that the Ark is depicted and its effect on people is like accurate in terms of the scripture about the Ark of the Covenant, regardless.
Not necessarily accurate.
Well, hear me out. Like regardless of like whatever, I don't know how it looks, but its effect, like it's been talked about being used as a weapon, melting people's faces, like, and there's different theories on whether it's like radiation, possibly alien, or like some form
Anything but God.
Some form of chemical warfare. And I'm not saying it's not God either. Like, I mean, you guys know that that's not my beliefs.
I do find it interesting that...
But those are just like different, more like...
So,
in my opinion, grounded possibilities.
So, rabbit hole, if you want to go down it.
That's
Absolutely.
what we're here for.
Okay.
Excuse me.
You mean a
Foxhole. Okay, we'll go down the rabbit hole that's in the foxhole.
Let's suck our own
Alright,
dicks here
so,
for a second.
So, I can't remember the exact scripture reference right now, but there's a scripture passage that speaks of David moving the Ark of the Covenant from the Philistines back to Israel.
Yeah.
And God had given the Israelites a specific way to move this ark. It had to be carried by the priests on their shoulders. And they had to have so many people in front of them, like playing trumpets, and so many people behind them playing trumpets, and all this shit. And it was a big ordeal. And David essentially went, "Fuck that shit. We're just gonna put it on a brand new cart and haul it with a bunch of oxen."
I quote, David said,
"Fuck that shit." He's like, "We're not carrying it all that way."
You know what? I bet he did say that.
I mean, that's what I would have said.
That's how people have been talking for years.
So then they're putting it. They put it on this cart and they're hauling it with oxen. And as they're going down the road, it starts slipping. And this guy sees the Ark of the Covenant, which is like the Israelites' treasured religious possession, slipping off the cart. And he reaches out to grab it and push it back on the cart so it doesn't fall, and drops it instantly. So, like...
Damn,
like,
we're just trying to help.
Yeah, he's just trying to help. Like,
that's a bad day.
That's a bad day trying to do the right thing.
Fucking cake today.
But, so then David went, okay, halt all this. We're going to leave it at this guy's house. And he's just going to watch it for us so I can understand what's going on. That guy had, like, better crops than he'd ever had in his life. His cattle were producing way more offspring than ever. Like, totally...
They had some fat milkers.
Yeah, great, like, completely changed.
Those udders were about to burst.
They were bursting udders, man. They were bursting udders.
Some bursting udders.
So, like, it was just, like, it was for, like, the Ark of the Covenant prescribed method of movement, and the way God had told the Israelites to move it. If you didn't follow that prescribed thing, he would kill you dead.
You know,
it is interesting. So you were talking about how, like, you know, the different explanations for what the Ark of the Covenant might be.
Real quick, before I lose this, I think that's the name of this podcast, The Ark of the Covenant and Bussin' Udders.
English teachers are always like, you gotta pull the audience in, you know, come out with a statement that somebody would never even think of.
Gotta get that hook.
Yeah, that'll pull people in.
But you were saying.
So as you were talking about different explanations for possibilities, you know, hey, this is what they might have encountered with the Ark of the Covenant, which would create an explanation for
just
why things happen.
Different ways.
And almost always it seems that as we progress throughout humanity, you know, we've got a basis of science and understanding of how the universe works. You know, we've got scientific law, and we try and fit everything within that. And as we grow into adults, everything has to be rationalized within the laws of nature that we understand.
Yeah.
And everybody's always just trying to rationalize everything. There can't be things that we don't understand. We have to understand all things.
But there's always going to be things you can't understand.
And it almost seems as if there's like a pattern of just rationalize. Yeah. Like, for example, like even I do that myself. Like I think back to my childhood with these crazy things that I happened, and then as I grow into an adult, I'm like, well, maybe this is what actually happened. There's no way this happened.
I'm still trying to explain the golden giraffe made out of sunlight, but
Yo, I would like to hear this story.
Wait, what the?
I think I've talked about this on one of the previous podcasts.
Enlighten us.
But I was like on my uncle's shoulders, and I was, you know, 2 or 3. It's one of those memories that like you have
can't
as a
forget.
child.
You can't forget.
It's just like one of the very few that you remember from like pre-memory stages. And so he's probably like 11 or 12. I'm on his shoulders, and we're crossing the street in a small town, and I like look to my left down the street, and I just saw this giant giraffe made out of sunlight. Like it was just a silhouette of a giraffe made of brightness. And then I just looked back and we kept going. It was probably just the sun, like the sundown.
There's that rationalization
coming down
there.
through the trees,
But it could have been a legitimate golden giraffe sitting on the street.
That's my spirit animal coming to me as a child. Maybe I'm a fucking giraffe.
Maybe you are.
I don't know.
I mean, I could see it.
I
Really not that tall.
No, it's your space cadet.
Head in the clouds, baby.
Head in the clouds, baby girl.
There's a few stories. So like this one time I saw a dragon. I don't know if it was a dragon, but I lived in Washington State at the time, and I had stepped out on my front porch and I saw a bird way out in the distance. But it was huge as fuck. So like even though it was probably at least like a mile or two away from me, like you could tell the size of it. Like it had to have a wingspan of at least like 40 or 50 feet. And so I even called my brother and sister out there. I'm like, hey, come look at this. Like, this is crazy. Do y'all see that? They even seen it. So now I've got witnesses and everything. And it was just this large black flying creature, you know.
Like you saw wings a flapping?
Everything, dude. It was very clear. It was daytime. It was recorded with our brains in 4K. And I think back and I'm like, oh, no. I was small, so I must have thought bird was big. You know, maybe it was like a California condor or something, you know.
California condors are fucking...
But,
Are you in California?
I was in Washington. It's close.
Oh, well,
2 states
It's close
away.
enough.
I could buy it. I'd buy it.
So
buy it.
I went and asked my siblings, like, hey, y'all remember that time that we saw this huge bird? And they're like, one of them's like, absolutely not. I don't even remember that. And then and they're both older than me, you know, so their memory should have been even fresher. The other one's like, no, I think I remember that, but it was actually probably just like a regular bird, you know, this rationalization of what actually happened.
Well, it's hard to believe that you actually saw a
But
dragon.
I remember vividly the entire encounter, and I think back like, okay, no, I did see how big this thing was. It was fucking, and I'm not saying it was dragon, but it was dragon sized.
On rationalization, it's like, you know, there's all these ancient stories of dragons throughout different cultures. I think they started in China.
Well,
No, so like, the amount of historical documents talking about them proves that they were real.
Well,
From the different cultures, in my personal opinion, if you have that many cultures talking about a specific animal that is the same thing, I believe that they are possibly real.
Here's my touch on the rationalization of it, is that we think that it was ancient cultures finding dinosaur bones.
Well,
and just
on
thinking
dinosaur
that they were
bones,
dragons.
T-Rexes, right? They're all depicted with tiny little arms, right?
Yeah.
Well, feathers and the frames of wings of birds, weaker than bones, wouldn't fossilize. They could fade over time. They think that maybe T-Rex skeletons were actually dragon skeletons, and those little arms are actually the beginning of the wings.
And all the
that would make sense.
Because isn't like the long finger parts like more cartilage than
Yes,
bone?
absolutely. And there's all kinds of issues with how they depict fossils as dinosaurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like they do this technique called vacuuming, which creates this false depiction of dinosaurs.
Where they're
They
all
use this
muscle and skin.
Right,
and,
right. They
super
use the
tight.
same technique using
you get
modern animals like a flamingo and a penguin,
Right.
and they're like, this is what it would look like
Yeah.
using the same technique to depict what
You
dinosaurs
get the
look like.
Jurassic Park
And you
look.
get dinosaur-looked flamingos
Yeah.
and penguins.
When like this is something that always tripped me out for a long time, was knowing like the closest relative to the T-Rex now is a chicken. Their bone structure is like the same, so maybe
That could make sense.
Maybe
going
it-
off the dragon thing.
maybe it wasn't a dragon, maybe it was just a giant fucking chicken.
There's also
That'd be a big fucking bird.
Be a big
onto
fucking bird.
my
But with the
giant
firmament-
bird I saw. Y'all are aware of the term cryptid, like Bigfoot and Mothman.
Bro, I was
There's
so
also
into
one called
cryptids. I'm
there's
still
one
so
called
into
Thunderbird.
Yeah.
And it's a giant bird with like a
Giant.
24-foot wingspan. Maybe I saw the Thunderbird.
Maybe.
Other people seen it.
I'm big. I'm so into cryptids. Actually, I have a photo of me standing next to the Mothman statue in Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
And the Mothman's behind him, actually flying in the air.
Yeah, I
Look
wish. I wish. I tell you, I did. I think I might have talked about this before, but I did go to the Mothman Museum in that little West Virginia town, and it was the saddest fucking thing of my life.
Why is
Like,
that?
Oh,
because
my
there's
gosh.
6 dead kids in the museum.
So I go in and I'm like, hey, you know, and I was pretty fresh into the army, so of course I'm like,
Yeah, I'm in the army.
y'all have that military discount? And he's like, yeah, but it's going to be $4 for you. Probably a $6 ticket to go into this one room. And then the guy's like, he heard the words army, and he's like, do you listen to Sabaton? And I'm like, no. But now I know that all Sabaton does is make like fucking army march songs, basically.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But I go into this one-room museum, and the entire museum is like 6 newspaper articles from the actual events, and then the rest is all props from the Richard Gere movie. I was like, okay, cool. This was only a 4-hour fucking detour from my 20-hour drive. No big deal. But I saw the statue. That was cool.
It's interesting how myths evolve. Even on top of that, how we see ancient civilizations. Everything we pick up from these ancient civilizations, I'm bringing us back on topic a little bit.
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
So everything we find for historical significance to sort of relate to these ancient civilizations, where like we look at it in the most serious outlook ever. Like this must have been what they worshipped. This must have been like how they educated themselves, as if they didn't have entertainment or jokes back then. Like, different documents we find back then, they're like, this is what they believed, as if there wasn't satire and entertainment back then.
Meanwhile,
like, so think about in the future of now. 8,000 years, they're going to find fucking Disney World. Yeah. They're going to see a giant mouse, and they're going to be like, they must have worshipped this giant mouse person.
So, like...
I mean, that's fair. That's a valid point I've never thought of.
On that, you can find Roman fucking, like, graffiti.
Roman fucking?
Well, I mean, we know the Romans were fucking.
Yeah, they were fucking.
But you can find Roman graffiti that's just dicks. It's like dicks and I fucked your mom jokes.
Greatest civilization ever.
Humans don't change.
Humans are humans. It's like
humans
World War II photos of dudes using fucking big rocket, like whatever they had at the time as dicks.
Right between their legs.
Everybody likes to sort of like separate themselves from the way ancient civilizations or historical people might have been. But yeah, they're
just humans.
Even something more recent, Shakespeare. I say recent in like a grand scheme of things.
Fair enough.
Shakespeare is not some deep fucking poet. Like, yeah, he wrote poetry, but his plays were for entertainment. They're the equivalent of fucking Marvel movies today. So, like, all of his plays, sure you have the tragedies, but, like, the tragedies had all this, too.
Like, Endgame. Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
Tragic.
Well, Infinity War's tragic. Endgame was a joke. But
wait, which one's first?
Infinity War.
Yeah, Infinity War. That's what I meant.
So Shakespeare, like, all of his plays are just, like, dick jokes and entertainment. Even Much Ado About Nothing is a, play about fucking a bunch of couples, whatever. I really don't know. It's not what I'm familiar with. I'm more about Hamlet. But at the time... Nothing was a euphemism for pussy. So, like, Much Ado About Nothing is a double entendre. But, like, Much Ado About Not Going On, but also, this show about getting laid, buddy. Like, Taming of the Shrew is Taming of the Slut. Like, Shakespeare was just entertainment, but because it was like, it's all these famous plays from 100 years ago. Let's study
it. Must be romantic.
And we try to like overthink it and look super deep. It's like, no, this is literally just entertainment.
We've already sort of forgotten what early 2000s culture was
like.
And
Exactly.
we think that we can understand what the ancient Egyptians and Roman culture was like based off of like a couple of artifacts we found. Like I guarantee you we're so far off. It is interesting to look at, but.
Like, what would
we also like to think that they're like these super unintelligent, not advanced people, as if they didn't create things we can barely create now.
Like, imagine if they found like a cell phone in 400 years, and history, and like there's a big Blade Runner blackout, and they forget what they are, and they'll be like, all of these people just carried around these big blocks in their pocket as a fashion trend.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, but
the bigger the block, the more fashionable you are.
So much speculation.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of advanced things that they found from the past, now they did find I forget the name of the device.
A dildo.
I can't believe I forgot the name of the device. It is one of the most advanced pieces of technology they've ever found. It was able to. It was like a clock, but for the solar system. And so it had.
Where was this found at?
I want to say it was in Rome. I want to say.
That would make sense. Rome was like the culture, like the.
But it had each of the planets, and it would. It was an exact. It was extremely accurate. So it had an exact representation of each of the planets and their position in the solar system, where they would be throughout the year. So it was able to measure each planet and as they rotated around the sun. And it was just an extremely advanced clock, but it also included every planet in the solar system. And,
that they had found at that point.
And they had found this, and it's, you know, obviously it wasn't completely intact when they found it, but they recreated it, and that's exactly what it did. And it sort of stumped modern scientists to how they figured that out. You know, because at that time, you know, they're working with telescopes where they can barely make out what the moon looks like in an in-depth level.
You got to think, like, so the oldest skeleton that has been found, that is our current skeleton, is 200,000 years old.
Which is housed in the Museum of Israel, is what it used to be called, but now it's the Rockefeller Museum.
Oh, is it? Are we coming back to this? I don't want to come back to this.
Well, that's where it is. It is 200,000 years old.
Where's Mac to talk about the Jews?
Oh God.
Yeah, the Rockefellers bought the museum, which houses the oldest human remains ever, which date back to 200,000 years old, and it was found at a organized burial site.
And that's what I was about to get into, is if our current skeleton that we have now, the what are we, Homo erectus, if the oldest one that we found is 200,000 years old, that means it has to be older than that, because evolution, or the change of things, however you want to fucking put it, because I know we all have different views on this, doesn't just happen.
Well, so the scientific method is pretty good.
Yeah.
But, however, using the scientific method when you're trying to figure something out, you have to include every variable that affects it.
Right.
And because it's been so long since these events happened, whether they were 10,000 years old, 200,000 years old, 2 million years old, we're missing so many variables that we can't accurately account for everything that affects the erosion and anything that could have manipulated how we interpret this information. And so because we're missing so many variables, anything we really find out from ancient times is wishy-washy in a sense that we don't know what could have affected it and changed how we're interpreting that.
I mean, it could have been like in a ditch that got flooded with water and eroded, and like, okay, that took 10 years, 20 years, 30 years off of it.
I mean, I've been farted on by a guy that probably added 30 years of fucking wear and tear to my body. You know?
Blake, why'd you do that to him?
Listen, my farts earlier were rough. Taco Bell.
No kidding. I didn't realize.
Yeah, they were bad, bud. I'm sorry. But like, you gotta think of all the ice ages that we've had while humans have been around. Maybe there was only one. I don't know, but there have been so many cataclysmic events that could have literally toppled societies. So I think there's a pretty fat possibility that there have been advanced civilizations to our level, if not more, that have just been obliterated by natural catastrophes. The flood being a big one, you know?
Yeah.
Whether you're religious or not, there was a great flood. How Noah might have known, maybe Noah's just a story that was made, who fucking knows? But there was a giant flood that wiped out.
There was another cataclysmic activity that happened. I think it was around 200 BC. There was, I think it was a giant volcano, the largest volcano eruption that's ever happened in recorded human history.
Pompeii?
And
Pompeii just wiped out Pompeii.
That was one of the most casualty-producing volcanic eruptions. But this one was a larger volcanic eruption that the ash itself stopped the sun from hitting the earth for almost a year straight.
Yeah.
And so there was no ability for photosynthesis to happen, and so crops wouldn't grow. And so like 30% of the earth died from starvation that year because they couldn't produce food.
Isn't that how one of the ice ages started? Was just like a giant super volcano that covered the earth in ash, and there was no sun.
it could have manipulated
I could be totally
the earth,
fucking wrong,
but I have no knowledge on the matter.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we're literally just spitballing things that we've heard. We have no sources. We have no research. We're not academics.
I've done research, but I can't tell you from where.
We're not academics. We're infantrymen, okay?
I'm working on my academic resume right now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is that so?
2 more years on my bachelor's.
Man's going to be a history teacher.
Hey, there you go.
Can't wait. I keep
The foxhole will get deep then.
I keep looking back at being a math teacher. It's like it just sounds so fun to me.
No,
Now,
fuck
in turn,
that.
you would only have to know one thing.
Yeah, I would just have to know
Like,
math.
your curriculum never changes. It's just like, this is your formula. Learn it, know it,
And then
teach
when
it
I-
over and over again
And then
forever.
when I do it for 20 years, I can get mad at a 14-year-old for not understanding it.
You
right
stupid
away.
fuck.
Why don't you fucking know this shit?
Yeah.
You taught
I
me
learned it when I was
once.
30. You should know it when you're 12. How does that make sense? It doesn't.
Oh, Jesus.
The teachers are funny. How you can get into a field like that and then just get pissed at kids for everything they do. Like, you know, that's the whole job description. Is teaching a bunch of idiot kids.
How can you be a 40-year-old person and really have beef with like a 16-year-old?
I have to say, for the first time being on this podcast, I like how we started off with Ancient Egypt, and now we're talking about high school teachers.
It goes all over.
This
the
is
place.
entertaining. It's very entertaining.
Hey, that's the flow.
It's the flow.
That's the flow.
It's the foxhole.
It's the foxhole.
We'll get back into it because
What happens in the foxhole stays in the foxhole. Is that where we're going with this shit?
Yeah, and then published on the internet for all to hear.
one thing I kind of wanted to talk about, and this is something that, like, you know, is more explored than I thought it had been, is like the influence of psychedelics throughout history in religion and things like that. So there's this book I learned of recently that I want to read called the Magic Mushroom and the Cross, or something along those lines, that thinks that either mushrooms or some other psychedelic was a huge influence in Christianity. And it makes sense because there are so many.
There's that rationalization right there.
Hear me out.
Okay, now you have my attention.
There's so many religions that have very similar visuals. Listen, man, I'm kind of drunk, so like my word choices are not correct.
I guess I'm driving home because I'm sober.
Image. I'm buzzing, so my words aren't coming. But like imagery of half human, half animal combinations, or the pine cone for like the pineal gland, like it.
Okay,
It's a little
okay,
weird.
you're talking about Greek mythology there, not Christianity.
Okay, then why does the Pope carry
Well,
around a staff with
Christianity
a
even
pine
talks
cone?
about like angels having,
Yes.
animal type
But
depictions.
that's okay. Yes,
But
And the thing is,
that's not.
if
a
you
human
talk to
form.
people who do psychedelics, they don't talk about animals and human hybrids.
they do.
They don't.
They do.
I've talked to many people who've done psychedelics.
Okay, I'm about to get.
It's more so just like they see people's souls, or like as
Yes.
if they understand at a deeper
now
level,
I'm
but
about
no
to get-
manipulation of actual visuals.
I'm about to get real Joe Rogan here.
Okay, let's get Joe Rogan.
But the DMT.
Okay.
If you're not doing it, what are you doing?
Now, I've never done DMT,
Same.
but apparently one of the most common visuals is an entity or a being who takes the form of a half human, half animal. And DMT is found in a lot of plants or animals that are very similar to the origin where a lot of religions started. I gotta pee, so keep talking.
So, but this is the thing here, Blake. Well, damn, this is more
All right,
directed towards
so
you. Hurry up and
this
pee.
is for the audience, right?
This is for the
All right,
audience.
so he's saying, you see this visual. DMT presents a visual of this half human, half animal hybrid, right?
Right.
Right, and then they use that as rationalization. Hey, this belief on half animal, half human is because of this. But think deeper, right? Why is it that everybody taking this, which
Sees
manipulates
that
the way
same thing.
you exactly
That's-
right? What is this thing being presented?
Is it-
Why is it being presented?
Exactly. Is
and
it
what does it
opening
mean
up-
for your brain itself?
Is it opening you up to a different plane?
Right,
Are you
because
seeing
a
a
lot
different
of people
plane?
think
Because there is a
that,
spiritual plane.
in lots of different religious texts, they talk about that children are able to see things that adults aren't able to see.
Exactly.
And it's as you grow older, as you consume different things and rationalize your way of thinking, you prevent your brain from being able to comprehend these things on a
Because
possibly spiritual realm.
You've
Because-
grown up, and it's not possible.
I do have my rationalization for it, though.
My
So,
turn to
hold
pee?
on. So this is what I'm gonna say. I understand where you're coming from, but you got to remember that Christianity was based more on a Christ saying this is what you can and can't do. You
Oh,
cannot.
I'm talking about pre-Christ, baby.
Okay, so Christianity started with Christ. Okay.
But the build-up,
So
the build-up came from like Moses. And
So
all
yes,
shit.
that was.
And I got some stuff to talk
that
about
was-
with the burning bush.
So that was the Israelites, and then the Jewish religion. Now Christianity stemmed from Christ. He's in the bathroom, buddy. Christianity started from Christ. He is he's the one who started the whole Christian religion, because that's why he was crucified, because
Yeah.
the Jewish religion did not acknowledge him as the Messiah.
Right. He's just
So
a
that's
prophet.
they saw him as like a
And
false prophet. They saw him as a
Okay,
false
so
prophet.
I thought Judaism saw Jesus as a prophet.
No, he was a false prophet. Therefore, that's why they crucified him, because it was sacrilege that he said he was the Christ.
It was the Romans who crucified him.
No, they used the Jewish elders used the Roman leadership to crucify and torture Christ.
Yes.
So like scourge. So like you either
Jarvis comes in from the bathroom. Yes.
yes. So the crucifixion, it was one form of torture. Okay, it was one form of punishment.
Yeah.
And then scourging was another form of punishment. Well, the Jewish elders wanted Christ crucified, and Pontius Pilate, was like, "This man has done nothing worthy of crucifixion. I will scourge him." And then his whole thing was like, he will scourge him and beat him within an inch of his life, hoping that it would make the Jewish elders be like, "Okay, he's got punished enough." So, like, the reason that Christ was whipped near to the point of death before being crucified was Pontius Pilate trying to save him. It was the Roman leadership, like the Roman government, trying to save Christ from actually being crucified.
Depending on the emperor of Rome at the time, there's been some that have actually been advocates of allowing religious freedom for Christians and the
Yes.
practicing of the faith, such as like Constantinople or whatever the fuck his name is.
Constantinople, baby.
However you pronounce his name, what is it? The Council of Nicaea was called upon by a Roman emperor, and that was so that they could sort of figure out the different disputes among the Christian faith, because there was a certain believer of the Christian faith who was trying to say that Jesus was just a prophet and he wasn't fully God but just fully man.
Right.
In that
Well, wasn't he supposed to be fully man and fully God?
right.
Yes,
And so there
he
was
was.
one, his name was like Ares or something, and he was trying to, he had a good large following talking about how Jesus wasn't the Son of God but only like a prophet for God. And
Which
so
was John the Baptist. He was a prophet for God.
the Council of Nicaea was called so they could figure out all the major disputes of Christianity at the time, because this was like 300 AD, right? And so it was a few hundred years later, people were trying to figure out, okay, we need a baseline, because a lot of people think the Council of Nicaea is where they came up with all of the books of the Bible and what order that was. It was a different council, I forget the name of it, but the Council of Nicaea was to come to a resolution for all the major disputes in Christianity. Because there was a lot of conflicting views in different sects of Christianity at the time, and they're like, all right, so we need to sort of come to common ground, vote on everything. What does Christianity as a faith believe in? And that was called upon by a Roman emperor at the time.
Yeah, it was he combined the pagan religion and the Christian religion, and combined some of the holidays because he was trying to, like Christmas, where like Christians celebrate Christ's birth. Christ was probably more likely born in like September, October area.
Yeah, more in the
But
fall.
he tried to make it more like a part of the pagan religion.
to Yule.
To Yule, right? Because like he wanted to try and combine the religions and make it so everyone could get on the same page and all this stuff, so that there wasn't a bunch of massacres and murders and
On the opposite side of things, there's been some Roman emperors who absolutely hate Christians.
Yes.
Such as Emperor Nero.
who would feed them to lions.
Yes. In ancient Hebrew and ancient Greek, they would use numbers to represent letters. Every letter had a number that corresponded with it. And so people would use nicknames as numbers. So as you were talking about the graffiti that was on the walls and stuff, they would also do like the little like, oh, J plus M, but they would use people's numbers as their nicknames. And so a name would be like, oh, hey, my name corresponds with the number 457. So it'd be like 457 heart 333, because those numbers were the nicknames to their names, because their names corresponded with those numbers. Emperor Nero, who persecuted Christians very often, his name corresponded with 666. And that is actually where 666 sort of stems from as this evil number.
The number of the devil.
Because Emperor Nero's name in numeric correspondence would be 666, and how he persecuted Christians, so they saw him as an evil force against Christians. And so 666 became this evil number and sort of evolved into something more than it was.
How 666 like probably started as Roman slang.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy town.
That's some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I think the whole psychedelic aspect gets pretty interesting. I think ayahuasca is the most interesting part of it.
So, okay, this is going off what I was saying earlier. Is like the whole Christian religion, like there were certain things that they were not able to eat health-wise, like that God told the Jews not to, the Israelites, not to eat because it was unhealthy for them. So, like drinking and all that stuff was not part of what they were okay with doing because it was a sin.
Yeah.
So like I don't know this for a fact. This is my speculation, but I personally don't believe the Christians or the Israelites at the early stages of the Christian religion were doing things that were giving them like
That's true.
crazy visions. You know what I mean?
Because even like drinking in general everything was told to be done in moderation.
Yes.
You should never drink so much in which you don't make your own decisions.
It was not a sin to drink. It was a sin to be drunk. Like anything that altered the
way of
human
thinking,
mind
yeah.
and the way of thinking was a no-go for the Israelites and the Christians.
I'm talking about way earlier than that.
But okay, I understand what you're saying, but you were talking about the Christians and like,
Moses.
but they were
So,
still
like,
Israelites, and they would still
yeah.
fall under the laws of under the laws that God gave the Israelites.
So, counter argument. You got to think of how many people follow certain religions, but still be getting fucked up and doing coke, for example, and stuff like that.
Yes,
So-
human temptation. Yes, I agree.
So, like, there.
Well, if you look past that, right, in the time of Jesus Christ in the Bible was resurrected, right? He came
Yes.
back to life in the tomb.
Yeah.
And
Was that-
all of
was
his
that
followers, the
psychedelics?
apostles, died on the basis that he did get resurrected. They were told, hey, if you say that you continue to say, hey, no, Jesus did come back to life, we'll kill you for it. They believed it so much so that they continued to say that he did that until they were killed for it in extremely gruesome ways.
Yeah. Peter was crucified, and when they went to crucify him, he goes, "You will not crucify me the same way you crucified my Lord. You will crucify me upside down, because I am not equal to my God."
Right, that's the upside down cross.
Yes.
Yeah, I
it
was about to
stems
ask,
from
that's what
Peter's crucifixion.
Yep.
So
It
what-
is interesting how a lot of like symbols are depicted now and what they
Yeah.
represent, but then
So
if you
I-
like look further back into them, they always come from something that's totally different.
And that was
Yeah.
paraphrasing. That was not
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
what he said,
No.
but that was paraphrasing.
I'm curious how the inverted cross became satanic when it came from someone who followed Christ and just wanted to not be
Well, it's like
equal.
the Star of David in Jewish faith. That
Yeah.
it's literally the flag of Israel.
Yeah.
That didn't even come into play until like the 30s or something. Is like at the earliest the late 1800s,
Right.
And it had nothing to do with the Jewish faith in and of itself.
Till the Star of David.
The Star of David isn't the Star of David, but it more so represented. I can't remember exactly where it came from. But it was like a certain sect of Judaism,
Yeah.
and they used that symbol, and it had nothing to do with the actual faith.
Well, that's like the pentagram was never satanic. It had more to do with like pagan and
Yeah.
paganism, and how it was a symbol of protection. The swastika was like a
The
Taoist
the
symbol.
the swastika was
There's Taoism and Buddhism.
and it represented peace until
The Germans got a hold of it.
the Germans made it seem as if that's the only thing it can represent, and now
Yes.
it's literally
a symbol
like
of hate.
It's a symbol of hate.
like saying the N word is like having the swastika. It's like, no, that's a no.
And like okay, we're gonna go and probably piss a lot of people
Well,
off
another-
here. But like the rebel flag itself wasn't a symbol of hate when it was designed. It was a symbol of I want my state to do what my state
and the
wants
thing
to
is
do.
too is like the common interpretation of like the Confederate flag, the rebel flag, wasn't even the flag that was officially used by the Confederacy.
Exactly.
A lot of things. So people
It's
think that
legitimately a rebel flag. It's rebelling against government.
And it's not even.
It's
was
not
not
about-
even the official Confederate.
Exactly,
flag.
but it's all about rebelling against a tyrannic government. Is how they saw it.
people think that information flows like it does now, like like it's always done that. But the internet didn't exist back then. So even when you do find these symbols, like when they're utilized in these bad ways,
they might have had some internet. But
that's true.
You never know.
You see these
we'll
pyramids.
talk about some underwater mercury planets and shit.
But yeah,
Yeah.
people didn't spread information. So a lot of times these symbols meant what they meant specifically for certain families or groups, and
Exactly.
it didn't translate to the next group over. It was just that family said this. So like you can find information on a lot of people back in early America who would talk about like the Civil War and what it meant to them. And a lot of times it had nothing to do with slavery.
So
and it was just because that family was brought into it because of this or
Okay.
that. Now, because the Civil War itself may have a lot to do with slavery.
It did.
And it was related to whether or not it should be spread to other states and prevented for future use. But certain soldiers within the Civil War weren't technically fighting for whether or not they supported slavery or not. It was just like, oh, well, my family's fighting on this side, so I'm going to join that.
I can give that.
So, like,
sure.
the
At
commanding...
a governmental state, though.
The commanding general of the Confederate Army, Robert E. Lee, legitimately freed his slaves before fighting in the Civil War and said the only reason he was fighting for the South was for his state, the state of Virginia. Okay? Like, a lot of people...
I'm not saying they're all bad.
No, and I'm not... And believe me, I believe...
But the Confederacy was kind of bad.
The Confederate... I'm not condoning the
The
Confederacy.
Articles of Confederation are dog shit.
Yes, I can completely 100% agree with that. But I can also say that not everyone that fought on the Confederate side was condoning slavery.
It's just
There
easier for people to teach history by painting everything in one way or the other.
It's
and
History is written by the
moving on.
victors. History is written by the victors. If the Germans had won World War II, we would have been the bad guys.
Point in case. So there was the Olympics were held right before World War II in Germany, and the United States had a track member who was an African American who won gold for his event. And he said that Germans treated him better than the Americans ever treated him.
Yes.
And he won gold for America.
Well, and another interesting
History
thing
is
that,
written by the victor.
Nazis. It was supposed to be like an atheist government, but they would still wear like a belt buckle or something that said something about. It was something similar to "In God We Trust," like how we have. Well, obviously, it wasn't the same, but it was something of the same vein. So yeah, of course, like. Not every person who's a part of a war is for the cause. Like, dude, I mean, we went to Afghanistan. I think all of us agree that there was no reason for us to be there.
I can 100% agree that.
And
there
that's
was no
with
reason
information being spread so much more easily now than it was back then. Think about back then, the way in which people came a part of different causes and things of that nature. Like it's just all
gotta
word of mouth.
with the
Propaganda was so much easier to follow at the time because that was your only source of information.
So, but like, we went to Afghanistan 20 years into the war. We knew what was going on.
Yeah.
There was no reason for us to be like the early stages of the war. I can completely understand everyone thinking we needed to be there.
Right.
Okay, but like when we went because we were ordered to go. This and the other thing. But they saw us as the invading force, the bad guys, when we were just doing what we were told. Not necessarily because we thought we needed to be there.
It is interesting. So, like, because the war has been going on so long, the people in Afghanistan, like the people who were combatants, were probably babies and toddlers at the time of the initial invasion. All they've known is American forces being there.
Yeah.
And then their parents, obviously just knew, like, oh, well, the Russians were here before that.
Yeah.
Like, all they've known is invading forces, and they've never had some sort of an advanced public education system to sort of teach them a basis of knowledge. All they know is
war.
This is what my parents said. Everybody's always been fighting. Like, they've got no grounds for understanding anything past that they've been getting shot at. They're going to shoot back.
I'm gonna be 100% honest. If it was the same, if I was in the same situation, I'd be doing the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
Like if it was an invading force coming into my country, I'd do the same thing.
Back on symbolism and back on ancient stuff. Which, I mean, obviously there's a whole lot of ancient shit in the Middle East that I feel like we probably haven't even uncovered or gotten into.
But yeah, because there's no
way to find it.
Because it's always war ridden, has been for about 1,000 years now.
Yeah,
they've got no time or money or teams to go there and actually uncover ancient stuff, even though a majority of all ancient biblical texts and religious texts are all talking about the Middle East.
Yeah, and we can't get in there.
I do want to say, I think it's interesting how so many symbols are viewed as satanic when they really don't have anything to do with any form of Satanism. Like, for example, Baphomet, like the classic goat that you see, you know, the Salve, Coagula, and all that shit. Baphomet is a symbol of like a deity that was possibly worshipped by a sect of the Knights Templar, and it's basically just a yin and yang. It's just a different form of yin and yang.
But isn't it also supposed to be like half male, half female?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So hear me out. So it's half human, half animal, half human, half angel, half man, half woman, and on its wrist it has Salve and Coagula, so like to dissolve and to
the origination of the trans community.
As well as
honestly,
as it has like two serpents on it, one's light and one's dark. It's about opposites coming together. It's a yin and a yang, just in a different form.
But also, so I can understand what you're saying, where it might have originated from, but I
mean, we just talked about how things get twisted.
And things get twisted, and they have their now said meaning.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like the cross. The cross was a symbol of a horrifying death.
And it is interesting how it's utilized as like a symbol of Christianity.
A symbol of Christianity.
Like if Jesus came back, you think he'd want to see the thing he got tortured on? No, my man.
But the thing is,
PTSD.
if Jesus is, fully God, he would understand what people meant by things and would look deeper. Yeah. Like, yes, you are wrong in the sense that this is what this represents, but I understand where your heart is.
But like what I'm saying here, like once things get twisted to a certain point, you can no longer personal opinion. You can no longer try and argue that point because of the said persona and imagery of that.
And it's just like with the swastika.
Like the swastika. You can argue till you're blue in the face that the swastika ain't bad.
Exactly. I can't.
But general population will call you an idiot.
One interesting thing on the Christian side of things is the use of the word Yahweh. And like, I don't know if you've heard any Christian songs and stuff. They're always singing about Yahweh and as if it's the name of Jesus. But it's more so closer to Jehovah, even though J wasn't a letter in ancient Greek or Hebrew. So Yahweh was actually one of the 70 sons of El in Zoroastrianism, which was the original monotheistic religion. And there was a lot of Zoroastrianites and Christians in which the Christianity started to come about, and so I think there was some mistranslation or some confusion there.
Okay, actually, so the reason that they use the word Yahweh is when God was communicating to the Israelites and his chosen people, he would not give them his full name. He gave them the word Yah. So then they continue on with it with Yahweh.
They said, God, what's your name? He said, Yah, bro.
So like his name, he would, like when Moses went up on top of the mount to meet with him, he couldn't even see him because like the image of God would kill him.
He like gave him fucking sunburn and shit, right? He saw God for a brief second.
He didn't even see God. He saw. So what happened was God. He's like, God, I want to see you, and God goes, okay, go hide in the rocks. I will go by, and when I go by, you can turn once I go by, and you can see the image of me leaving. Because if you see me, you will die.
Yeah. And like you can't even hear God's voice like God speaks through Metatron, right?
That I don't know.
So apparently, just to hear God's voice would literally like you'd explode.
So hearing his name, saying
Metatron
his name
is the voice of God.
So saying his full name is so powerful. Is so powerful that it would kill you, and seeing his face would kill you. His voice, I don't know about that because the reason I don't think that is 100% true is when Christ was baptized by John the Baptist, God spoke down and was like, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." And many people heard it and no one died.
Well, because it was Metatron. You got to do some looking into it because
I'm definitely going to have to now.
Sources have shown that Metatron speaks for God because God's voice can't.
I just think it's interesting, and like everybody talks about, like, in Jesus' name I pray and things of that nature, but like names itself don't change with language. Names are names. It's the same noises, and J wasn't a letter in that language, so Jesus wasn't his name, but it was more closer related to like Joshua, but with a Y, so it was like Yeshua. And it's just interesting how like his name has evolved, right?
Yeshua.
Through language, and they've sort of changed what his name is.
Nowadays, it's just Jesus.
God. But no, like Yeshua is more accurate. Correct.
I've seen that like historical breakdown.
Yeah. I mean, things will be lost in translation. Like you translate something from Spanish to English, and it's not going to have, like, you change a Spanish word to English or an English word to Spanish. It's going to be a different word.
Yeah, have you ever
but
seen,
it's the same meaning.
You ever seen like song lyrics that are in English translated to some other language and then translated back to English?
No,
and it's not.
It's because
not even close.
Language evolves with culture, and cultures are different, and so there's words that are invented that have no meaning in some languages. So, like in the Nordic culture. Everything is very spiritual there, similar to like Native American culture. And so their language is very much evolved around spiritual thinking. And so they've got so many more words for spirits and what they do and how they interact with people than like the English language, which is almost like infant when you talk about like anything spiritual. There's such a limited vocabulary there that you have to use the same word for so many different things.
In old school like Nordic stuff, they didn't even have a word for religion because they didn't view anything as like a religion or different beliefs. It's just the way things were.
Yes, this is true.
It was the life.
So, like, the Nordic religion was more just like everyday life.
Yeah, no, it was like, yeah, exactly.
It was just, this is how the world is. This is what life is.
So that's that's part of like just words and having meanings.
I think it prevents us. Different cultures from fully understanding certain concepts because every language does evolve with that culture, and not all cultures are surrounding certain aspects of life. And so when your vocabulary is limited to certain ways of thinking, it almost makes it more difficult to understand certain concepts.
Why do you think there's so many wars over religion?
God damn that Tower of Babel.
Thank you for saying that. So
here we go.
Remember what you were talking about earlier, that culture that was just found?
Göbekli Tepe, yeah.
Yeah, well, I can't pronounce that. I'm too dumb. As soon as you said it, I was like, could that be the Tower of Babel? Like the most evolved society to that point.
That is an interesting biblical story.
That is an interesting biblical story because they were the most advanced culture in the world.
And we read it as it's translated into English, so it's harder to actually understand the scope of what might have been happening. Because we read like, oh, okay, so they were building a tower to heaven, but like, what does it mean by heaven and tower to that point? What is tower, and why did it need to be stopped? Like, it is very interesting how all of that might have.
So this is where I want you to talk about the possible ability of communication between cultures around the world at certain times using.
You're welcome for that segue.
Using technology similar to a Tesla coil.
The universal language is math.
Yes.
There is a satellite, the furthest reaching satellite that man has ever made, which has left the solar system recently, a couple years ago.
Nice.
First man-made object to leave the solar system. It's
that
got
we know of.
First modern man-made. The Romans have a satellite that's fucking in another galaxy already. But no, we put a little information disc on there. It's like a vinyl disc, basically, loaded with information of what we would want extraterrestrial life to find about humans.
At the time that we sent it, do you know the name of this one? I think I know the name.
I forgot the name of it.
Yeah.
But we used math to sort of write where we are in the universe, what humans are made out of, what Earth is made out of, to sort of just create a universal map to us because we want aliens to come find us.
So we can get an alien wharf. This is great.
Yeah. Well, what we really want is alien pussy.
That was Voyager.
I mean, fair.
Voyager 1.
Voyager 1, that's what it
Oh,
is.
are they really going with Star Trek on this shit? Oh, that's really what they're going with is Star Trek.
Launched in 1977, which was long before Star Trek Voyager came out.
So then they came after. They stemmed from Voyager 1. But it just recently left the solar system.
In November of 2021, it's nearly 14.5 billion miles from Earth.
Nice.
Jeez.
Man, they're really
They're
booking.
moving.
Well, yeah, it's going fast as shit. It's just space is so vast.
Yeah. Where are they sending that shit?
It's
Just continuously out.
Yeah.
Far
away.
want aliens to find it.
Well, this is going to be interesting.
Little do they know,
like
aliens are already on Earth, living in Antarctica.
Okay, I got something crazy to say about that.
God.
There's this guy who was like a member of the CIA and like a high-ranking official who, through some loophole in his NDA, can speak about certain things. And the most important thing I got out of it was that we have had communication with aliens and that humans, as we are now, are a hybrid of like old school, whatever the fuck we were, mixed with aliens.
Even Canada's defense agency, the equivalent of like the Pentagon in Canada, the head of Canada's quote unquote Pentagon, after he got out, said almost word for word the exact same thing.
So now here's, I'm not saying
ties into a big storyline in the X-Files. Just throwing that out there.
So I'm not saying what you're all saying is wrong, but could that not just be okay? So you're saying two people, high-ranking officials, say this stuff, but we know high-ranking officials in different walks of life who believe that birds are drones.
No, so I don't give people
So,
credit
you know what I'm
because
saying
they're
here?
high-ranking officials, but because they're high-ranking officials would make sense as to why they had access to the information.
True, but you're telling me that there's only one.
This is a cat.
And it's
who
not
worked at
just them. So
Area 51.
the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act,
Mm-hmm.
has recently allowed the CIA to release a bunch of information, unclassified information, on their UFO program, which has been going on since the 1950s. Us, as taxpayers, have been paying for this program on average $60 million a year
Project
for
Blue
70
Book.
years straight. Right. You can go and read these files, which are actual CIA files, which have been unclassified for the public to read because of the Freedom of Information Act. You can read real documents from the CIA and what they think of UFOs. They've been studying this thing for well over my time on this earth.
Yes.
And
since
to them,
Roswell's what
they
kicked it off.
think of it as a very serious possibility. They say it's unidentified aerial phenomenon, and they wanted to look into it to see if it's a possible security threat, make sure our nation is safe. And it was like 2018 when they finally were like, based on all of our information over the past 70 years, we can say that although we don't know what it is and we think it is extraterrestrial in nature, we don't think it poses a national security threat. I mean, there is some interesting stuff. Most of the stuff that they released were different random encounters people had with UFOs, and they would interview these individuals, get all the information they could, and then study the sites and see what they could find out. Some of them are quite interesting. There was, like, for example, this one time in Colombia where the Colombian army was out on patrol for training, and there was a squad, and there was a squad leader who went out, and he didn't come back. They saw a bright light in the field, and he just disappeared. 3 days later, he came back, and his watch was still set to the time in which he left. He thought he was only gone for a few minutes, and he had been gone for 3 days, and he was confused why people were looking for him. And
that's a very common thing with abductions. Lost time. They think they've only been gone for several minutes when it's been hours or days or however long.
Time is interesting, as it is just a measurement of the rate at which things are happening, but it's not a law. Like, it changes based on the speed at which you're going.
Yeah.
And the location you are. So, like, the faster you go, the slower time goes for you. theoretically speaking, if you reach the speed of light, time will stop for you, and if you go past the speed of light, it will reverse time. So, like, they can actually measure when pilots are flying at past the speed of sound. Every second is only like 80% of a second for people going regular speed, and so like it'll end up being like 8 minutes for someone going the speed of sound is 10 minutes for everyone else on Earth.
I mean, that makes sense. You get in the car, you do 100 miles an hour, time's a lot faster, a lot slower than someone doing 50.
I mean, that's like a mathematical thing, though.
Yeah.
Time is relative.
Time is relevant.
The easiest to digest example is the movie Interstellar. This little maneuver is going to cost us 51 years.
Good movie.
Yeah, and he comes back to Earth and he has to bury his daughter, who's a grandmother.
Yeah, she's old as fuck.
I laughed. I felt like a sick and twisted individual.
Dude, that movie made me cry. Like when they finally got to the point where they could receive all the video messages they'd got, and he saw his daughter grow up, and he's just like losing his shit. Saw that in theaters, bro. I was losing my shit.
I watched it in theaters too, and I was laughing like 3 or 4 times in that movie.
Wow, what a dick.
Yeah, I'm a sick, twisted fuck. My buddy looked over at me and goes, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I'm like, "I don't know. This is funny as fuck."
Let's see. All right, so about an hour and 21 minutes into the podcast.
I think it's a good time to really put season 2 together.
Yeah,
I think
Really
so.
start it off.
Interesting initiation to season 2 of the Foxhole.
I think we have a lot of topics we can come back on, go
Yeah.
more in depth.
That we jumped off topic onto it.
Hey,
For any
man.
viewers who have made it this far, we're planning on recording often like we did for the first season. So you won't have to wait another year for the next episode, maybe a couple of weeks. And we'll get some more content out there for you, and hopefully it sounds much better on the newer mic.
And with our new photo, you'll get to see Jarvis and I's face.
This is true.
Yeah, as if I'm not actually a lizard wearing a human skin face.
Yeah, we're just proposing conspiracies to get people off the idea that aliens are real.
Yeah, that's fair. Smart plan.
This is our failed attempt as aliens to sort of convince the human race.
This is an alien psyop.
We've only got 60 views.
We'll get there.
It was an effort. It was a solid effort, but it might be a crashing burn.
In 25 years, we'll be competing with Rogan.
But yeah, close to the episode.
I think that signs it off.
Good episode, everyone.